He spent his life believing he controlled his destiny until he realized he was just a piece on a much larger board. A woman forgotten by time returns to drag him into a labyrinth of betrayals, secrets, and global conspiracies. As his empire crumbles and invisible enemies move against him, a single truth becomes evident. If this story is interesting you, subscribe to the channel to receive all our exciting stories. Continuing. The afternoon sun penetrated through the high windows of the Oakville Women's Correctional Facility, creating elongated shadows that danced along the austere corridors. August Mendoza, at 67 years old, walked with the elegant posture that had always characterized him, although his heart beat erratically. As president of the Mendoza Institute for Rehabilitation Support, his visits to prisons were frequent, but something on this particular day made his hands sweat inside the pockets of his impeccably tailored Italian suit. The institution's director, Dr. Paul Rivers, led the entourage through the corridors, explaining the professional training programs. August, however, could barely pay attention. His thoughts wandered to 25 years ago when he met Helen Taylor at a charity event. She was a promising young lawyer, with magnetic green eyes and an intelligence that fascinated him from the first moment. "And here, Mr. Mendoza, we have our latest initiative," the director's voice brought him back to the present. "A legal assistance program coordinated by volunteers that's when he saw her. Helen was sitting at one of the library tables, wearing the institution's orange uniform. Her hair, once a vibrant brown, now showed streaks of gray. So she maintained that aura of elegance that had always distinguished her. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to freeze. "Any problem, Mr. Mendoza?" asked the director, noticing his sudden paleness. No, just a slight indisposition," he replied automatically, unable to look away. Helen rose slowly, like a queen on her throne, and walked towards him. The other inmates and staff seemed to dissolve into a peripheral blur. There was something in her walk, a calculated determination that sent a shiver down August's spine. "It's been a long time, August." Her voice was as soft as he remembered, but carried a tone he had never heard before. "What a pleasant surprise to see you here." The director seemed surprised. "You know each other?" "Mr. Mendoza and I are old friends," Helen replied, without taking her eyes off August. "Isn't that right?" August tried to maintain his composure. Years of difficult negotiations had trained him for moments of tension, but nothing prepared him for what she whispered when she approached for a formal embrace. "You're next." The words, spoken with a terrifying calmness, made his blood run cold. The rest of the visit transpired like a feverish dream. August responded mechanically to questions, smiled at appropriate moments, but his mind was elsewhere, reliving newspaper headlines he had tried to ignore in recent months. Helen Taylor, the respected corporate lawyer, accused of being the mastermind behind a financial scheme that shook the market. Thousands of investors harmed, fortunes disappeared, a plot so complex that the best experts were still trying to unravel it. As he left the prison, August loosened his tie, feeling suffocated. His driver, noticing his altered state, asked if he was okay. "Take me home, Carl," was all he could say. In his apartment on Fifth Avenue, overlooking the city he had helped build, August poured himself a drink and walked to his office. Helen's words echoed in his mind. He turned on his laptop and began researching everything about the case that led to her imprisonment. The Taylor case, as it became known, involved a scheme of international proportions. Helen was accused of creating a network of shell companies that diverted billions in investments. But the more August read, the more inconsistencies he found. Documents that seemed too perfect, witnesses who suddenly changed testimonies, evidence that appeared out of nowhere. His cell phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Mendoza," a young female voice. "My name is Mary Sanders. I'm a journalist from the Economic Daily. I'd like to ask a few questions about your relationship with Helen Taylor." August felt the glass slip from his fingers, shattering on the floor. How did someone already know about his visit? Before he could answer, the journalist continued, "Specifically, about the documents we found with your name." August hung up the phone with trembling hands. The journalist's call had awakened memories he had fought to bury for decades. He walked to the safe hidden behind a Pollock painting, his fingers sliding over the numeric keypad with the familiarity of an old ritual. Inside, besides important documents and some family jewels, there was a folder yellowed by time. 1998, he murmured to himself, carefully removing the folder with almost reverential care. The photographs that escaped as soon as he opened it instantly transported him back to that time. Helen, radiant in a navy blue dress during the Mendoza Foundation gala dinner. Richard Almond, his then partner and best friend, smiling beside him. The three looked so young, so full of dreams and ambitions. The intercom rang, startling him. "Mr. Mendoza," the voice of Anthony, his personal security guard, sounded concerned. "There's a situation in the lobby that requires your attention." In the panoramic elevator, descending from the 45th floor, August observed the lights of New York City twinkle like earthly stars. The city that had welcomed him when he arrived from the Midwest, decades ago, with just a suitcase of clothes and many dreams. Now his empire extended across skyscrapers that helped shape that skyline. In the lobby, Mary Sanders was waiting for him. She was younger than her voice suggested on the phone, probably no more than 30 years old. Her eyes, however, carried the determination characteristic of great investigative reporters. "Mr. Mendoza," she stepped forward, extending her hand. "Thank you for receiving me, even without an appointment." "Miss Sanders," he replied, maintaining the composure that characterized him. "I confess I'm curious about these documents you mentioned." Mary took a tablet from her bag, sliding her finger across the screen until she found what she was looking. "Forrester, do you recognize this signature?" The document displayed made August freeze. It was a contract dated 1998, with his signature next to Helen's and Richard's. But that specific contract should never have come to light. "Where did you get this?" "I have my sources," she replied with a half smile. "But the most interesting thing isn't the origin of the document, but its content. Especially the clause about Project Phoenix." Project Phoenix. August hadn't heard that name in so long that he had almost managed to convince himself it never existed, almost. "Miss Sanders," he said, regaining control, "I suggest we continue this conversation in a more private location. Would you accompany me to my office?" On the way back, August noticed that his hands were still trembling slightly. Project Phoenix had been the turning point in his career, the moment when the Mendoza Group went from being just another promising company to becoming a market giant. It was also when everything started to go wrong. "Did you know that Helen Taylor tried to talk to Richard Almond a week before she was arrested?" Mary asked as soon as the elevator doors closed. August felt the air leave him for a moment. Richard had withdrawn from business 15 years ago after a fight that shook the foundations of the company. Since then, he had been living in seclusion on his ranch in rural Virginia. "How do you know that?" "I also know that Mr. Almond refused the visit," she continued, ignoring his question, "and that the next day he transferred a considerable amount to an account in the Cayman Islands." The elevator doors opened on the 45th floor, and August guided Mary to his office. The night view of New York City served as a backdrop for what would be a long night of revelations. "Before we continue," he said, pouring himself another drink, "I need to know exactly what you've discovered about Project Phoenix." Mary placed her folder on the mahogany desk and began pulling out documents. "I discovered enough to know that you, Helen Taylor, and Richard Almond created something much bigger than a simple investment project, and that perhaps, just perhaps, Helen's imprisonment wasn't an accident." At that moment, the office lights flickered once, twice, 3 times, before going out completely. In the dark, only the city lights witnessed the sound of footsteps approaching down the hallway. In the darkness of the office, August instinctively positioned himself between Mary and the door. The footsteps in the corridor approached with a deliberate cadence, echoing against the marble floor. The emergency generator should have kicked in automatically. Something was wrong. "Stay close to me," he whispered to Mary, who had already pulled out her cell phone, using it as an improvised flashlight. The door opened slowly, revealing the figure of Anthony, the security guard, with a tense expression on his face. "Mr. Mendoza, the entire building is without power. The elevators are stopped and the security systems have been compromised. We need to evacuate immediately." Before they could react, Mary's cell phone began to vibrate. On the screen, an unknown number. "Answer and put it on speaker," August instructed, his voice firm despite the palpable tension. "Good evening, Mr. Mendoza." An electronically distorted voice filled the room. "I see you're finally starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Helen sends her regards." Mary and August exchanged tense looks. The journalist quickly activated the recorder on her other cell phone. "Who's speaking?" August asked. "Let's say I'm just an interested observer, someone who knows Project Phoenix very well, and its true objectives." August felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you want?" "The same thing Helen wanted 25 years. Tag the truth. You have 48 hours to deliver the blue flash drive, or your empire will fall like a house of cards." The call ended abruptly, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing from those present in the dark office. "What flash drive is that?" Mary questioned, her journalistic instinct sharpened. August walked to the window, observing the city. For a moment, he seemed to age decades. Something that should have been destroyed a long time ago. The lights suddenly came back on, flickering a few times before stabilizing. On August's desk, his laptop started automatically, displaying a sequence of numbers and letters that made his face turn pale. "Their coordinates," Mary murmured, approaching the screen. "And a date, March 15th, 1998. "The day everything changed," August completed, sinking into his leather chair. "The day Project Phoenix really began." Anthony remained alert near the door, while August finally began to reveal the story he had kept buried for so long. Project Phoenix wasn't just an investment fund like everyone thought. It was a much more complex operation. Helen, Richard, and I discovered a way to predict patterns in the global financial market. Something revolutionary, but also extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. Mary typed furiously on her tablet. "The algorithms that Helen mentioned in her trial, yes, but she never revealed the true source of those algorithms. Richard was a mathematical genius, and Helen, she had connections with powerful people on every continent. I came in with the capital and infrastructure. And what went wrong?" August stood up, walking to an abstract painting on the wall. Behind it, another safe, smaller and more modern than the first. His fingers danced over the numeric keypad. Richard started having ethical doubts about using the system. Helen wanted to expand even further, use the power we had gained to reshape the global financial system. I was caught in the middle of the conflict. From the safe, he retrieved an old framed photo. In it, the three partners smiled in front of a panel with the stylized logo of a golden phoenix. What none of us realized at the time is that we were already being watched. There were others interested in the project, people with the resources, and influence to make anyone disappear off the map. Mary studied the photo carefully. And the flash drive? It contains the original source code of the algorithm, plus documents that could compromise some of the most powerful people in the world. Richard hid a copy before isolating himself in Virginia. Helen knew about this, and now they know too. A metallic sound echoed down the corridor, making everyone turn towards the door. Anthony drew his weapon, but August gestured for him to wait. "Mr. Mendoza," his secretary's voice sounded over the intercom. "There's an urgent delivery for you." When Anthony opened the door, there was only a brown envelope on the floor. Inside it, a single sheet of paper with 3 words printed, "Find the hacker." Morning arrived with a light rain over New York City, transforming the skyscrapers into ghostly silhouettes through the mist. August hadn't slept. He spent the night in his office with Mary and Anthony, scouring old files and trying to decipher the received message. "The hacker," Mary murmured, pouring herself a 3rd cup of coffee. "Must be someone connected to the original development of Project Phoenix." August rubbed his tired eyes. Richard had an assistant at the time, a young computer prodigy. What was his name again? He rummaged through an old folder until he found a yellow document. Gabriel Sullivan. He helped create the basic structure of the algorithm. Gabriel Sullivan. Mary straightened in her chair, suddenly alert. The same Gabriel Sullivan who mysteriously disappeared in 2010. Disappeared? August furrowed his brow. I thought he had moved abroad after leaving the project. Mary picked up her tablet, her fingers quickly sliding across the screen. According to my research, he was last seen leaving a coffee shop in Greenwich Village. Then he simply vanished. His apartment was intact, as if he had just gone out for coffee and intended to return. Anthony, who had been silently observing the conversation, approached. Mr. Mendoza, it might be relevant to mention, last week we detected an attempted invasion of the company's servers. The intruder left a digital signature, a small drawing of a black cat. And that's important because, Mary questioned. Gabriel had a trademark, August responded, his voice low. He always drew a black cat in the corners of his codes, said it was his digital guardian. Mary's cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. New York Public Library, Research Department, 11 a.m. Come alone, look for the black cat. August and Mary exchanged looks. It was 9:45 a.m. It's a trap, Anthony declared categorically. Probably, August agreed. But it might also be our only chance to understand what's going on. The New York Public Library was relatively empty when they arrived, just before 11 a.m. The rain had kept away the usual visitors, and their footsteps echoed through the grand hallways. In the research department, among the bookshelves, they found a table with a powered-on laptop. On the screen, a screensaver with a black cat moving lazily. Sit down, a voice came from behind them. A man of about 45, wearing thin-rimmed glasses and a faded t-shirt with the logo of an old programming conference, emerged from the shadows between the shelves. Gabriel? August could hardly believe it. Long time no see, boss, Gabriel smiled, but it was a smile without joy. Or should I say ex-boss? You were alive all this time, Mary stated, her journalistic instinct sharpened. Why hide? Gabriel sat down in front of the laptop, his fingers gently drumming on the keyboard. Sometimes we need to disappear to observe better. Helen understood. That too late. You kept in touch with her? August leaned forward. Let's say I never stopped monitoring any of you, Gabriel replied, turning the laptop to show the screen. On it, dozens of windows displayed emails, phone records, and bank transactions. Project Phoenix never really ended, did it? What are you talking about? August felt a knot form in his stomach. The original algorithm, Gabriel began, his voice taking on a more serious tone. The one we developed. It wasn't just for financial predictions, was it? Helen discovered the truth, and that's why she's where she is. Mary observed the exchange with growing interest, her tablet ready to record every word. Richard didn't hide in Virginia by choice, Gabriel continued. He was forced to isolate himself when he realized the true potential of what we had created. And now, he turned the laptop again, showing a screen with a countdown timer. Now we have exactly 36 hours before the system goes into total collapse. What system? Mary and August asked simultaneously. Gabriel stood up, walking to one of the windows overlooking the grey city. The system you three created ended up evolving beyond anyone's control. It doesn't just predict financial patterns, it creates them. And there are very powerful people who have figured out how to use it for their own ends. August felt the weight of decades of secrets crashing down on his shoulders. The blue flash drive contains the only key to deactivate the system, Gabriel completed. But it's not that simple. The code needs to be entered simultaneously in 3 different locations by 3 different people. Helen, Richard, and me, August murmured, finally understanding. Exactly, Gabriel nodded. And that's why we need to get her out of there. But first, he pulled a small device from his pocket. We need to understand who our true enemies are. The device Gabriel was holding was the size of a common flash drive, but with a small LED display on the side. He connected it to the laptop, and immediately, a series of documents began to appear on the screen. Over the last 15 years, Gabriel began, I built a surveillance network focused on tracking the activities of the group that appropriated Project Phoenix. They call themselves the Consortium. Mary leaned over the laptop, her eyes quickly scanning the documents. These names, they're some of the biggest bankers and businessmen in the world. And politicians, Gabriel added. Ministers of economy, central bank presidents, financial regulators. The consortium has infiltrated people in key positions in virtually every developed country. August picked up a particularly voluminous folder. How did you get all this information? Let's say I learned a few tricks over the last few years. Gabriel smiled enigmatically. But the most important thing is here. He opened an encrypted file, revealing a series of emails. These are communications between consortium members discussing the Helen problem. As they read the emails, August's face grew increasingly pale. The messages revealed a meticulous plan to incriminate Helen using fabricated evidence and bought witnesses. They silenced her because she discovered something, Mary concluded, making frantic notes. Something big enough to threaten the entire operation? Helen was always too brilliant for her own good, August murmured, lost in memories. When we were partners, she could see patterns that no one else noticed. Gabriel nodded. And that's exactly what put her in their crosshairs. Helen discovered that the consortium was using the Project Phoenix algorithm, not just to predict financial crises, but to deliberately create them. Market manipulation on a global scale, Mary whispered, horrified. Worse, Gabriel continued. They perfected the system to influence elections, destabilize governments, and rewrite global geopolitics according to their interests. Thunder rumbled in the distance, as if underlining the gravity of the revelations. The rain had intensified, transforming the library windows into abstract screens of running water. And now they want the blue flash drive, August spoke, his voice heavy with guilt. Because it contains the original code, Gabriel completed. The only thing that can prove that the entire current system is based on stolen technology. More than that, the flash drive contains a self-destruct program that can bring down the entire consortium network. Mary frowned. But you said we need 3 people to enter the code. A security system that we created ourselves, August explained. Me, Helen, and Richard. None of us could act alone. The problem, Gabriel interrupted, is that we have less than 36 hours before the consortium executes Protocol Omega. And what's that? Mary asked. Gabriel turned the laptop, showing a complex graph. An artificially induced financial crisis, bigger than all the previous ones. The collapse of several important currencies, chaos in global markets, and in the midst of the confusion, they will consolidate their power definitively. And Helen will be transferred tomorrow, August added, remembering the warning, to a place we can never reach her again. So we need to act today, Mary declared with determination. But how are we going to convince Richard to help? He's been isolated for years. Gabriel smiled, for the first time genuinely. That's where my next trick comes in. He opened a new window on the laptop, showing a live transmission. Let's say I've been keeping an eye on our reclusive friend in Virginia, and I believe he's more prepared for this meeting than we imagine. On the screen, a security camera showed Richard Almond getting into his car, a folder similar to the one August kept in his safe under his arm. He's coming to New York, Gabriel announced. Now we just need a plan to get into Oakville. At that moment, Mary's cell phone rang. It was a message from Helen. The past never really stays buried, does it? Tell August the password is still the same. March 15th, the day everything began and ended. Gabriel's apartment in Greenwich Village was exactly what you'd expect from a hacker's hideout. Walls covered with monitors, servers humming discreetly. In a corner, and dozens of colorful post-it notes with cryptic codes and annotations. The place served as an improvised headquarters for the operation they were planning. Richard should arrive in approximately 2 hours, Gabriel informed, checking one of the monitors that showed the GPS of August's ex-partner's car. Meanwhile, we need to refine our strategy. Mary was sitting on the floor, spreading documents in a pattern that only she seemed to understand. Oakville's security system was updated 3 months ago, she explained, consulting her notes. But every Thursday between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m., they perform server maintenance. And coincidentally, Gabriel smiled, turning his laptop to show an email, tomorrow there will be a surprise inspection from the Department of Justice at the penitentiary. Or at least that's what the administrators believe. August, who had been silent for some time, finally spoke. How can we be sure Helen will cooperate? After everything that happened, "She's already cooperating," Gabriel replied, opening a new window on his computer. That message Mary received. Helen gained access to one of the guard's cell phones. She's been planning this for months. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made everyone turn to the door. Anthony, who was keeping guard in the hallway, gave 3 short knocks, the agreed signal. Moments later, Richard Almond entered the apartment. The years of seclusion had left visible marks, completely white hair, deep wrinkles around the eyes, but the intense gleam in his gaze remained the same. He observed each face present before speaking. So the day has finally come. August stood up, facing his old friend for the first time in 15 years. The weight of unspoken words hung between them like a dense cloud. "Richard," he began. No." Richard raised his hand, interrupting him. "It's not time for that. Gabriel kept me informed about everything. I know about the consortium, I know about Protocol Omega, and I know we need to act fast." He opened his folder, pulling out a series of old architectural blueprints. "While I was away, I wasn't just growing coffee in Virginia. I kept in touch with some friends from the past, including the architect who designed Oakville's security system." Mary immediately began photographing the documents with her tablet. "This changes everything. With these blueprints, we can create an access route that doesn't appear in the current systems," Gabriel completed, already furiously typing on his computer. "A ghost route. But we still need the flash drive," August reminded, "and it's in the bank vault." Richard smiled for the first time, a smile that reminded of the old days. "Actually, it's not. Helen never trusted banks, you should know that." He pulled a small blue object from his pocket. "She gave me this to keep the last time we saw each other, before everything fell apart." The blue flash drive, so small and seemingly insignificant, gleamed under the monitor lights like a sapphire. "She knew," August murmured. "She knew that. One day we would need this." "Helen always thought a few steps ahead," Richard agreed. "But there's one more thing you need to know." He connected the flash drive to his own laptop, protected by layers of encryption. The original algorithm had a deliberate flaw, a backdoor that Helen and I implemented without telling anyone. Gabriel approached, intrigued. "What kind of flaw?" "One that allows us not only to shut down the system, but to recover every cent diverted by the consortium over the last 15 years, and redirect them back to their original sources." Mary whistled softly. "This isn't just shutting down the system. It's reversing all the damage they caused." "And that's why they're so desperate," Richard completed. "It's not just about power or control. It's about the money they stole from millions of people." A sharp beep sounded on one of Gabriel's computers. "Guys, we have movement. Several black cars just left the consortium headquarters heading towards Oakville." "They know." August felt his blood run cold. "Somehow they found out about Helen." "Then we don't have 36 hours anymore," Mary concluded, already packing up the documents. "We have to act now." Richard took the flash drive and divided it into 3 parts like a technological puzzle. "Once we're inside, each of us needs to insert our part of the code simultaneously. If there's any delay of more than 3 seconds between the insertions, the system locks and triggers all the alarms," Gabriel completed. "I've seen this protocol before. It's elegant. And potentially fatal if something goes wrong," Anthony added from the door, always alert. August looked at each of those present, feeling the weight of responsibility. In a few hours, they would face one of the most powerful organizations in the world to save not only Helen, but also expose a conspiracy that affected the lives of millions. "So," he said, picking up his part of the flash drive, "let's go steal our friend back." The afternoon was falling over Oakville when 3 different cars arrived at the penitentiary complex by distinct routes. In the first, August Mendoza presented himself as president of the Rehabilitation Institute for a routine visit. In the second, Richard Almond, using a badge falsified by Gabriel, joined the supposed Department of Justice inspection team. Independente. The third, Mary presented herself as a newly hired lawyer for an inmate's family. Gabriel, in his apartment transformed into an operations center, monitored everything through hacked security cameras. "Position confirmed for everyone," his voice sounded in the tiny earpieces each wore. "Operation starts in 3 minutes. August walked down the main corridor alongside Director Paul Rivers, who seemed especially nervous that afternoon. "You? No, Mr. Mendoza. Your visit couldn't have come at a more delicate moment." "How so?" August maintained a casual tone while his eyes discreetly scanned the environment. "Well, with the ministry inspection today," the director wiped his forehead with a handkerchief, "and now we've learned that inmate Taylor will be transferred." "Transferred?" August felt his heart race. "I thought that would happen only tomorrow." There was a change of plans. The transfer was moved up to tonight. On the other side of the complex, Richard conversed with administrative staff, making meticulous notes like a dedicated federal inspector. Through the earpiece, he heard the conversation between August and the director. "Gabriel," he murmured discreetly, "we need to accelerate the timeline." "I'm on it," the hacker responded. "Mary, are you in position?" In the lawyer's area, Mary organized papers on a table. "Confirmed. But we have another problem. There are men in suits who don't look like prison staff, 3 of them near the main exit." "The consortium," Gabriel confirmed, switching between different cameras. "They arrived earlier than expected. Anthony, are you seeing this?" Outside, strategically positioned as August's driver, Anthony observed the movements through the car mirrors. "Affirmative, and more are coming." 2 black SUVs just parked on the west side. The tension was palpable. The original plan anticipated that they would have at least 2 hours until nightfall, taking advantage of the guards' shift change. Now they needed to improvise. "Attention!" Gabriel's voice sounded urgent in the earpieces. "Change of strategy. I'm initiating the server maintenance protocol now. You'll have exactly 4 minutes when the systems restart." Richard took advantage of the staff's distraction to slip into a side corridor. "And Helen? Have you managed to locate her?" "I'm trying," Gabriel replied, his hands flying over the keyboard. "Something's wrong. She's not in the usual cell." At that moment, August noticed unusual movement near the administrative wing. Armed guards were escorting a familiar figure. "Helen." "Visual on the target," he whispered. "They're moving her now." "Gabriel." "I see it. They've moved everything." "Up." "Mary, you're closest. Can you intercept?" Mary stood up calmly, gathering her papers. "Moving to point B, but I need a distraction." "Leave it to me," Richard responded, heading towards the main power panel. That's when the first unforeseen event occurred. One of the consortium men recognized Richard. "Sir," he spoke into his radio, "Almond is here. I repeat, Richard Almond is in the complex." "Gabriel," Mary whispered urgently. "We need the blackout. Now." "I can't," the hacker responded, his voice tense. "Something's blocking my access. They have another hacker in the system." The corridor lights flickered once, but remained on. On Gabriel's monitor, a message appeared. "Hello, old friend. Miss me?" Gabriel's blood ran cold. "It can't be." "What is it?" August asked, noticing the change in the hacker's tone. "Sophia," Gabriel responded, his voice almost a whisper. "My ex-partner. The only person who knows my codes as well as I do." In the corridor, Helen was being hurriedly led to the exit. Her eyes met August's for a brief moment, and she silently mouthed, "Vault 237. "She's sending a message," Mary noticed. "August, what does it mean?" Before she could complete the phrase, all the security doors in the complex closed simultaneously, with a metallic thud that echoed through the corridors. On the sound system, a female robotic voice announced, "Containment protocol initiated. All staff must follow emergency procedures." Gabriel cursed softly. "Sophia just locked everyone inside, and guess what? She has total control of the system." "Vault 237, August repeated mentally as he watched Helen being led down a side corridor. The number awakened an old memory almost forgotten. In 2007, he and Helen had visited a bank in Switzerland. Vault 237. How could he have forgotten? "Gabriel," he whispered into the communicator, "I need you to look up something in my banking history from 2007, National Swiss Bank, September." "Kind of busy here," Gabriel responded, his fingers engaged in a virtual battle with Sophia. "She's trying to trace our location." In the main corridor, Richard took advantage of the confusion to approach one of the guards. "Gentlemen, I'm from the Department of Justice. We need to evacuate immediately following security protocols. Nobody moves. A female voice echoed through the sound system, different from the automated one before. Especially you, Richard. You still owe me a dinner, remember? Mary, who was near the administrative wing, saw her chance. With everyone distracted by the mysterious voice, she slipped into an empty room and turned on her tablet. Gabriel, can you hear me without her intercepting? Secure channel activated, he responded, but I don't know for how long. Vault 237, Mary continued, her fingers flying over the tablet. I just cross-referenced the data. It's not an ordinary vault. It's a special account, a mirror account. In the operations center, Gabriel finally understood. Of course, Helen wouldn't keep something so important in an obvious place. The account would just be a reflection, a mirror pointing to the true location. Which would be, August asked, still maintaining appearances while talking to Director Paul. Right under our noses, Mary responded. The number 237, it's the code for a room here in Oakville, the dead files room. Sophia laughed through the sound system. Very clever, but a little late, don't you think? In 15 minutes, Helen will be in a more suitable location. And you? Well, let's say I have special plans. Sophia, Gabriel spoke, this time addressing his ex-partner directly through the system. Why? You were always too brilliant to be just another piece of the consortium. Oh, Gabriel, always so naive. Do you really think the consortium is the big villain in this story? They're just pawns, just like Helen was, just like all of you are. At this moment, Anthony noticed movement in the parking lot. 3 more cars arriving. Tactical team. Gabriel, Richard whispered urgently. Remember the protocol we developed for the Bangkok prison system? A smile appeared on the hacker's face. The sleeper virus? Sophia always thought it was too flawed to use. Exactly. While Sophia continued her monologue through the sound system, Gabriel began implementing a seemingly chaotic code. On the main monitor, command lines seemed to fail and correct themselves randomly. Amateur, Sophia mocked. You think I don't recognize that pattern? Counting on it, Gabriel murmured. Mary, still in the administrative room, found something on her tablet. August, the file from Vault 237, they're not documents. It's a recording. Of what? Of a meeting, March 15th, 1998. August's face paled. The day everything began. And ended, Richard completed, quoting Helen's earlier message. On Gabriel's monitors, Sophia continued to block and counterattack each invasion attempt, exactly as he had predicted. So focused on defending against the frontal attack, she didn't notice a small program infiltrating through secondary systems. 3 minutes to regain control, Gabriel informed. We don't have 3 minutes, Anthony warned. The tactical team is entering. That's when Helen, still being escorted, did something unexpected. She stopped abruptly, turned to one of the guards, and said something that made his eyes widen. At the same instant, all cell phones inside the complex received the same message. An audio file. No! Sophia's voice showed panic for the first time. Block all communications. Too late. The recording began to play on every device. Welcome to the Extraordinary Council meeting. A familiar male voice sounded clear. Today, March 15th, 1998, we will initiate Project Perseus. Perseus? Mary frowned. I thought the project was called Phoenix. That's the point, Helen finally spoke, her voice echoing down the corridor. It was never about a phoenix rising from the ashes. It was about Perseus, the hero who beheaded Medusa. Gabriel, finally understanding the complete plan, smiled. Sophia, you really should have asked why I was using such an obvious code. At that moment, all doors in the complex opened simultaneously. Chaos erupted in the correctional facility. With all doors suddenly open, guards and staff ran about disoriented, while the recording continued to echo from every cell phone. Project Perseus will be our masterpiece, the voice on the recording continued. While everyone searches for Project Phoenix, no one will notice the true plan developing in the shadows. Helen took advantage of the confusion to break free from the guards escorting her. With surprising agility for someone who had been confined for months, She ran towards the dead files room. "Go!" Gabriel shouted through the communicator. "I'll keep Sophia busy." August and Richard ran after Helen, while Mary used her tablet to guide them through the now tumultuous corridors. Anthony, from outside, coordinated with Gabriel to keep the consortium's tactical teams dispersed. "The file!" Helen shouted as she entered room 237. "It's behind the 1998 archive." As Richard and August moved the heavy metal shelves, the voice on the recording revealed more details of the original plan. "Project Phoenix will be our perfect scapegoat. When the global financial system collapses, everyone will blame the faulty algorithm. No one will realize that the true system, Perseus, will be silently taking control." "So that was it," Mary understood, typing furiously on her tablet. "Project Phoenix was never the main system. It was a smokescreen." "Exactly," Helen confirmed, removing a false panel from the wall. "The consortium didn't steal our algorithm. They deliberately planted a faulty version. Perseus was the real plan from the beginning." In the operations center, Gabriel faced his greatest challenge. Sophia is trying to regain control of the system. Wait a minute. His hands paused over the keyboard. "This doesn't make sense." "What is it?" asked Anthony, still monitoring the perimeter. "The code she's using, it's too familiar." Gabriel started to laugh, a nervous laugh of someone finally understanding a complex enigma. "Helen, you're brilliant." From the removed panel, Helen retrieved not just a flash drive, but an old laptop. "Gabriel, it's time. Protocol Chimera." "Protocol what?" Sophia sounded genuinely surprised for the first time. "You never wondered, Sophia," Helen spoke, turning on the laptop, "why I let you capture me so easily? Why I spent months in that cell, apparently resigned?" In the operations center, Gabriel was implementing a sequence of commands he had never used before. The sleeper virus. It wasn't to attack the prison's security system. It was to infect. "Perseus," Helen completed. Every line of code Sophia used in the last few months to monitor the prison was being replicated and sent back to the consortium's main system. August and Richard watched in astonishment as Helen connected the flash drive to the old laptop. On the screen, lines of code began to multiply exponentially. "During all these months," Helen continued, her fingers dancing over the keyboard, "every move Sophia made, every attempt to strengthen the system, was actually creating breaches in Perseus. The real virus wasn't sleeping, it was learning." "Impossible," Sophia shouted. "The system is impenetrable." "No system is impenetrable," Gabriel smiled, "when you have the original architect of the code working against it. Helen didn't just create Project Phoenix, she created Perseus." The facility's lights flickered. Again, but this time it wasn't Sophia controlling the show. "The consortium," Helen explained, still typing, "made a crucial mistake. They assumed I was just another disposable piece of the project. They never realized I had built a backdoor into every line of the original code." In the parking lot, the consortium's tactical teams received confusing orders on their radios. Their tablets and smartphones began displaying documents, emails, and bank transfers that should never have come to light. "Checkmate," Helen whispered. That's when a helicopter appeared over the correctional facility. Through the window of room 237, they saw a familiar figure descending on a rope ladder. "So," said Richard, "that's how you managed to plant the laptop in here." The man who entered through the window removed his dark glasses, revealing a familiar face they hadn't seen in years. "Punctual as always, Edward," Helen smiled. "Now, let's show the world who the real criminals are." Edward Martinez, the legendary financial investigator everyone thought had retired to Costa Rica, now stood before them carrying a metal briefcase. His characteristic smile illuminated his time-worn face. "Are the documents safe?" he asked Helen. "All of them," she replied, still working on the laptop. "Gabriel, status?" "Perseus is completely exposed," the hacker responded. "Every transaction, every manipulation, every decision from the last 15 years, everything is being automatically sent to journalists and authorities in 47 different countries." Sophia had gone silent, but her last commands still flashed. On Gabriel's screen, "Helen, and you planned this from the beginning?" "No," Helen replied. looking at August with a sad smile. I planned it since that day in March 1998, when I discovered the consortium had infiltrated our company. I had to choose, alert everyone and be silenced immediately, or pretend I knew nothing and build a defense from the inside out. August felt the weight of decades of misunderstandings dissipating. That's why you distanced yourself, why you stopped returning my calls. Every person I loved represented a vulnerability they could exploit, Helen explained, her eyes watering. I had to distance myself to protect you. Richard approached the window, observing the controlled chaos spreading through the complex. And Edward? How does he fit into all this? I was Plan B, Edward smiled, opening the briefcase. Inside dozens of flash drives identical to the blue one. When Helen realized the true extent of the consortium, she needed someone completely off the radar, someone who could build an international protection network without raising suspicions. Mary, who had documented everything on her tablet, finally understood the complete picture. Your imprisonment? It wasn't a defeat. It was a strategic position. The best way to hack a system, Gabriel completed, is to make it lower its own defenses voluntarily. In the facility's courtyard, the consortium's tactical teams were receiving confused orders from their superiors. Some were already lowering their weapons, while others consulted their cell phones, seeing the news that was beginning to spread globally. Sophia wasn't the only infiltrator, Helen revealed. Edward built a network of honest people within various institutions, people who were just waiting for the right moment to act. Project Perseus, August murmured, wasn't just a financial system, was it? It was a hydra, Helen confirmed. Cut off one head, two grow in its place. The only way to defeat it was to attack all heads simultaneously. Gabriel appeared at the door of room 237, laptop under his arm and a victorious smile on his face. It's done. Perseus is officially deactivated, and Sophia, well, she just sent an interesting message. Let me guess, Helen smiled. She wants to negotiate? Better, Gabriel showed his computer screen. She wants to confess. Apparently she has documents that even we didn't know about. Through the window, they saw police vehicles arriving at the complex, but this time they weren't for Helen. And now, asked Mary, her journalistic instinct still alert. Now, Edward responded, we begin the reconstruction. The global financial system will go through an adjustment period, but for the first time in decades it will be a fair game. Helen approached August, gently touching his face. I'm sorry for all these years. No, he interrupted her, holding her hand. You did what needed to be done. You were always the strongest of us. Richard cleared his throat, calling everyone's attention. I hate to interrupt the moment, but we have one last thing to do. He pulled his part of the blue flash drive from his pocket. August and Helen did the same. The final code, Gabriel explained to Mary, who was still documenting everything. The only way to ensure Perseus can never be reactivated. The three positioned themselves in front of the laptop, each with their part of the device. Like old times? Helen smiled. Better, August replied. This time we're on the same side. Simultaneously, they inserted the three parts. On the screen, a final message appeared. Project Perseus permanently deactivated. Initiating Global Transparency Protocol. Edward checked his watch. The stock markets open in an hour. The world will wake up very different today. Mary put away her tablet, realizing she had the story of the century in her hands. But there was one last question. Helen, why Perseus? Why that name? Helen looked out the window, where the sun was beginning to rise over New York City. In mythology, Perseus wasn't just the hero who defeated Medusa. He was the hero who used the monster's own power against it, turning it to stone with its own reflection. Sometimes, to defeat a corrupt system, you need to use its own weapons against it. August, Helen, and Richard watched the sunrise together, as they hadn't done in 25 years. The weight of secrets had finally been replaced by the lightness of truth. So, Gabriel broke the silence, packing up his equipment. Who's up for some coffee? I know a great diner nearby. Everyone laughed, the tension of the last few days dissipating like mist under the morning sun. After all, Some American traditions never change. After any great adventure, there's nothing better than a fresh cup of coffee to celebrate victory.